welcome everyone to this show and tell of Southwark's Digital Skills Needs Assessment Tool. Thank you so much for joining us today. So my name's Sophie Nelson and I'm the Digital Inclusion Projects Manager at LOTI, so particularly interested to find out more about this tool. And I'm really pleased to have Nick Wolf from Southwark Council presenting today, and I'll pass over to him in a moment. Just before I do that, just general housekeeping, can I ask you to remain on mute during the presentation, but there will be time for questions after. But of course, do feel free to add questions into the chats and any feedback as well throughout, and we can get to them after the presentation. Also, if you'd like to introduce yourselves in the chat, that would be great too. I think we have a few new faces joining us today, so it'd be good to find out your roles and where you work and your sorts of interest in this area of digital inclusion as well. But without further ado, I think I'll hand over to Nick to start us off.
Thank you, Sophie. Hello everyone, I'm Nick Wolf from Southwark Council. So my job title is I'm a Principal Strategy Officer in the local economy team here at Southwark. And so that kind of puts me in the kind of skills area, as well as everything else that a local economy team does. And that's kind of the origin of my engagement with digital skills and essential digital skills. But as you'll see, I expect when I go through the presentation, it's kind of gone much further into issues of digital inclusion more broadly, and engaging with people around sort of digital skills issues that are not necessarily simply about kind of economic outcomes. So I will start with my PowerPoint. There we go. I hope that's visible to everyone. So yeah, I'm here to talk today about the Essential Digital Skills Needs Assessment Tool and Dashboard we developed specifically. But in the kind of lead up to that, I'll talk through kind of how we got there a little bit and some of a little bit of the wider context of the work that we're doing, just to put it in its kind of correct context. So as I mentioned, kind of local economy team background. So this kind of dates back to 2018 when we revised our Southwark skills strategy, and digital skills obviously a big issue in most skills strategies and skills approaches these days, and that covers all sorts of things from kind of the very highest level digital skills down to the essential digital skills, which sort of sit quite often alongside kind of literacy and numeracy as kind of basic skills that people need to function in life and work. So this kind of came to me to have a look at and kind of lead on this stream in Southwark, and what we quickly found out was that there are lots of organisations, as there are kind of all over the country, working on essential digital skills, but we really didn't have much coordination and much understanding of what everyone was doing on our patch in Southwark. There'd been kind of a little bit of effort internally to look at how we approach these sorts of things, but considering the kind of the real extent to which essential digital skills cut across all sorts of organisations, from the voluntary community sector through obviously to colleges and training providers, I thought the most important thing and beyond is to start to pull people together. So we ended up with a group which we called the Southwark Central Digital Skills Group, which had a lot of council services in it. I mean, a lot of council services touch people and engage with people who have essential digital skills needs, and there's obviously a digital first push kind of generally across the local authority space, which means that, you know, there's a strategic aim to improve people's digital skills. Adult learning providers, obviously, voluntary and community sector, as I've mentioned, TRAs, and kind of included in that. We've also got we brought in our broadband providers who had been given away leave agreements to bring ultra-fast broadband across the borough. So they were community fibre and hyper-optic, who often also had a community offer as part of that, and were kind of engaged by the council as part of those agreements to support digital inclusion measures. Job Centre Plus, obviously, and other employment support organisations. My field being kind of local economy, and this being in a kind of an economy focused approach, we thought that was important. So, and since that time, we basically met as a group every 6 weeks. And the first thing to do was to kind of to pull together our strategic approach. And so this happened fairly quickly. And we came up with kind of an overarching set of sort of an overarching aim and set of objectives. The aim being to work collectively across the community to ensure all Southwark residents can develop the essential digital skills they need for their daily lives and work. And the 3 objectives, kind of first of all, looking at improving the understanding of need and demand for essential digital skills. Secondly, going on to deliver kind of the right skills in the right place, accessible. And thirdly, to look at innovation, because obviously with essential digital skills or digital skills generally, what is essential and what is kind of, what is needed for everyday life is changing all the time. And this came kind of to a crunch and came right to the fore for all of us March 2020, when suddenly we went into lockdown, and the urgency of digital inclusion was suddenly right at the top of the agenda, and this question of kind of innovation and suddenly we were all having to work remotely, work off Teams and Zoom, and access to services, work and social connection became suddenly increasingly digitized for everybody. So just to kind of give a quick summary of what we've done before I get on to the kind of the main chunk on the understanding need and demand side, a lot of that has been the work that I'm going to talk about today, which is developing this common needs assessment tool and then using that data, or trying to use that data, to kind of look at patterns of local needs. In terms of delivering better provision, quite a lot of kind of consolidation, bringing things together in one place, improving the sharing of information across providers, developing a new digital champions approach in Southwark, developing an interactive kind of map of where all these resources are, making sure it's available in community settings, and doing a lot of work with Southwark Works, which is our kind of employment support service that the council commissions and delivers, around trying to improve the way that employment services are engaged and linked up to essential digital skills. And then on the kind of collaboration innovation side, we've now got kind of 20 organisations in the group. There's I mentioned the kind of the landing page. This is all this is all innovation. Even the basics can be innovation when they're not there to begin with. So just making sure that kind of anyone who's looking for support can find it in one handy place. And then, I mean, just kind of quite interesting, some of the lockdown work, which I won't go into in any detail, but just kind of working across the group to share knowledge and skills about how to bring skills support remotely to people when people obviously don't have the skills to access the digital tools to get the support remotely. How to do a kind of blended classroom and home learning models during lockdowns and in the kind of the period of tiers, and then bringing kind of linking the group into wider initiatives like the LOTI programs around digital exclusion mapping, and community calling project, which was about getting devices to people who needed them at the time. The key thing to talk about now then is this whole bit about developing insight into residents' needs. And the first kind of one of the first issues that we faced was a real kind of lack of understanding of who in Southwark had essential digital skills gaps. And so we had the Lloyds Banking Group national level data, which is broken down at kind of London level. Beyond that, we really didn't know much at all. And everyone was sharing information around the table, but every organisation who works with people, if they were using a kind of a diagnostic tool to test essential digital skills, it was different. Everyone was asking slightly different questions. The national essential digital skills framework was relatively new in 2018, and not everybody had adopted it or had changed their measurement to align with it. So we couldn't put all this data together really and get a decent picture of who was out there and what the needs were. So the solution that we proposed was a common tool that we could use to to get all this data together in one place. So I'll just have to swap my screens for a moment and just kind of talk you through how we got there. If you'll bear with me. I thought I might just be able to click on links and open them in my presentation, but it doesn't work, despite them all being Microsoft products. So there's something to work on there. So the first place that we looked, well, no, this isn't the first place we looked. First thing we found when we did go out and look was something up in Scotland, which was hugely helpful in starting to think about how we could put a kind of a common tool together. And this is the Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations. And it is this has already come much further on than when we first saw it. And so this is a kind of an online checkup which they developed around foundation skills, life skills and work skills for digital skills. Again, linked to the Essential Digital Skills Framework. And if we kind of just scroll down the page, kind of breaks down those key skills here. And I go to a checkup, I go to take the checkup, and it asks me some pretty straightforward questions about whether I can turn on a device. I can use controls on a device. And then this is I was looking at this morning, this is a new question, which I think we need to start thinking about and adopting, which is using accessibility tools on my device. Anyway, this is essentially kind of, it links to the foundation skills in the National Essential Digital Skills Framework. Broadly links to them anyway. So you go through this, you click on these things, and it takes you through to the next section, which are life skills, and that takes you through questions about kind of general life skills and takes you to work skills, same set of questions. And at the end of it, you have the option to get your results emailed to you, and that's all great. So we thought, well, how can we use this to do something similar in Southwark, which will give us a similar set of results, but actually enable us to kind of bring all those things together. We'll do two things really: bring all the information together, but also allow the partners that we're working with to capture the information for their clients. So I'll take you through what we developed in Southwark. Now, this screen sharing is a bit. Sophie, can I ask you to nod if you can now see a Southwark page on your screen? Yes, brilliant, thank you. So this is our landing page, where we have all the different kind of bits of information about kind of staying safe online. This is where you can find information about training, digital champions, etc., etc., etc. You go to test your internet skills, and what we find is an initial kind of just review, which you can kind of scan yourself to see, well, where am I on my journey? Am I a starter, improver, or digitally skilled around these metrics, which basically map onto the National Essential Digital Skills Framework about kind of using information, using and managing information, communicating, creating and producing information, being safe online, and problem solving. And then if you want to, you can go and do an Essential Digital Skills survey. So this is then the start of the tool. In terms of the privacy notice, well, that's important because, as will become clear, we are both keeping this data within the council, but also sharing it with other organisations. So I just give my consent for that. And then we have some basic questions about access to the internet, first of all, which asks me about the devices I have, whether I have Wi-Fi broadband, similar things actually, whether I have a laptop, tablet, smartphone, and then this section which links to the question of working with partners. So are you taking this assessment through any of these services? So if I'm a client or a learner going to Morley College, for example, who have just started to use this tool, I could be doing this at the college, I could be doing this with a tutor sitting next to me, but I will click this, and then at the end of this process, all of my data will go to Morley College, and so they will have a little summary of where I started from. At the same time, all of this data sits on a database on the council's servers, and I can download it and analyse it along with everybody else who fills in this form from whatever organisation or even none of them. So then we go through, the basic questions about the foundational skills, about and these are, you'll see, these are simpler than the questions that are on the Scottish form. We had a big kind of conversation around with our partners about how to make sure that we were asking the right questions, so everybody felt that they were comfortable with the questions being asked, the language being used. I think we do need to update this, having thought about questions about accessibility, for example. And so this was, this was developed kind of about a year ago now, and it's always worth coming back to. And then we move on to kind of the general skills for communicating, etc., etc., etc. So if I'm just going to click through these because they're all essential questions. So we can see it's about skills for communicating, skills for transacting, being safe and legal online. The question about I can do this, I can't do this, I want to learn more about this, and I'm not interested in this. So again, this came from, I think, other surveys that that partners had used, and other existing client kind of skills baselining and assessment forms that we used, because some felt that it was important to differentiate from kind of, obviously whether you can or can't do something, and whether you're interested in learning more, and where your kind of motivations lie as well. So I can, for example, click both. I can do this and I want to learn more about this, or I can do this and I'm not interested in this, etc., etc. Which is helpful in terms of learner data, makes data analysis a little bit more complicated, but I think we've got past that. And then we have an optional section, which is about digital skills for finding a job. So rather than digital skills for work, as in being in work, this links to kind of the type of organisations who are around the table, really, who are, a lot of them are about supporting people into work. And the first step is about, particularly, considering the changes over the past couple of years, and before that, how competent and confident people were around using digital tools for job search itself before you even get into work. So these are questions we developed ourselves, and they had come out of a sort of a very early pilot version of this this questionnaire, which was used by Southwark Works, who were finding that a lot of clients were having trouble with kind of basic stuff like attaching a CV to an email. So we have these questions about using the internet for job search, uploading CV, completing an online job application, and registering for job agencies online. The beauty of this kind of optional section is that we can also add other optional sections if we choose to. So there was a conversation about adding an additional set of questions for housing services and other council services and other services that people kind of wanted to use more often. I think we had some conversations with public health colleagues about kind of access to digital health tools and things like that. They're not on there for now, but they could be added. So this is a kind of a very much a kind of modular set of questions. And then this is where we capture the data about the individual. Optional questions, continues through, and this is where a similar thing, you can enter your email address and get your results, and your results are basically just a summary of the questions that you answered. It's nothing particularly fancy. You don't get a chart and a fancy graph or anything like that, but it's really a tool that I think that is just more useful for learners kind of to sit down with their tutor once they've used this, to if they're in a kind of a formal learning setting. I go back to here. So These are our current partners. You saw them up on the screen, and obviously there's a very different set of organisations here. So we've got Southwark Works, which is a an employment support organisation. We've got sort of 3 FE colleges who are all at slightly different stages of adoption, but we are starting to get use from it. The Pensioner Centre, not many pensioners. For a good example, there are not many pensioners are going to be completing the kind of the optional questions about looking for work. Or some maybe. And the Digital Champions, who are obviously the kind of outreach working in the community. And that comes on to kind of questions about how easy it is to use this tool to sort of when you're out and about, and you need to be online and sitting down with someone to help them to complete it. So that's what we built. And what are we doing with it? Well, one of the benefits of it, but I think there are some challenges around this, is that it can be used anywhere. So the aim is that it can be accessed from anywhere, and I think this is true when people are accessing it online, and the thinking was that people might end up kind of being signposted to it on their own accounts, but obviously that's not really happened an awful lot. Most of the access is through organisations that are using the tool, and it can be used in paper form and then uploaded, but obviously then there are some challenges with that as well. So that's just coming on to kind of the Digital Champions bit and using it kind of out and about, and can have a bit of discussion about that later if helpful. But the objective and where we get to with it is that it collects all the data in the back end in common format for analysis, and we use a kind of a fairly straightforward data sharing agreement for that, which has been kind of developed over time. It's now, I think, stronger than where we started, but it's still relatively straightforward. Each participating organisation gets the individual data, and then we all have access to a dashboard, which was built by a colleague of mine, and I'm now kind of keeping up to date, which I'll come on to and show you in a second. And the other area that we are looking to use this data for is about mapping and kind of integrating with other wider efforts to map and measure digital exclusion in a kind of across different criteria and across different geographies. So there's a digital exclusion mapping project which LOTI leading on, which I'm sure Sophie can tell you more about, which Southwark is a partner in, and we don't have this data yet mapped onto that, but I would hope that we can do in time. So what I'll do now is bring up the actual dashboard, which I hope will be interesting to see, and it's an Excel file, so it's not developed for easy presentation on screen. So what I'll do is I'll zoom in and then kind of scroll across the screen a bit, and and then hopefully it will be clear what it's saying. So this is kind of what comes out of it, and this is what we update and share with partners every few months. Essentially, we have a basic guide to it on one tab, the dashboard itself, and then a set of commentary about the data. And so to come onto the dashboard, first of all, the total number of participants who have completed this form is something over 1,000. We have most of those by far are from Southwark Works. They kind of piloted it and have been using it more than any other organisation. The interesting thing about the participants and all of this data, which I should say up front, is that these are people who, and I guess it should be clear that these are people who have entered and engaged with an organisation around an issue of digital skills. So none of this data is representative of the general Southwark population. it is representative of this sample who have presented to an organisation, and in the case of Southwark Works, to be fair, not necessarily have a digital skills issue. So I should sort of dial back on that a little bit. In Southwark Works, they use this tool as a diagnostic tool for everybody who comes to register with the service. So this is anybody who engages with the service and is looking for work, and so that makes up kind of the majority of the participants here. And others are people who have presented with a digital skills issue. So anyway, I guess the key point is that there's some complexities in analysing this information and drawing too many conclusions about the wider population. But what it does do is tell us about some of the issues in relation to the people who are presenting with to these services. So, I mean, for example, so then we come down here to the different slicers which we have. You can have in Excel. So this can then slice all of the data by the service that they register with. So again, I can sort of show you, if I click on Southwark Works, it shows that, yeah, I mean, you know, as I said, the majority are Southwark Works clients. We have ethnicity. We have a lot of ethnic groupings because there's some challenges with standardization of that. Age groups, disability, employment status, gender, and then timing. And so what have we learned? Well, broadly, and what this kind of tells us is we have kind of, and again, this is data that can, you know, we can analyze this in whichever way we like, but this is what we've kind of started with and are finding fairly useful. So the number of residents who have Wi-Fi and broadband at home, overall 87%. The type of device owned, the number of devices owned, you can see, you know, so we've got around just under 6% who own no device, 13% who don't have access to the internet at home at all. We scroll down to the essential digital skills, we can see how many have each of these, and we can see kind of those that a lot of people have, you know, using email, for example, and those that fewer people have, for example, keeping passwords safe. We can scroll across to the so if I come up to the foundational digital skills, similar thing there. And so we can see that, you know, well, most people thankfully know how to turn a device on and off, but not everybody does. 8% say no, or don't say no, but they don't say yes. And so if people don't say yes, then we're counting it as you know, someone not claiming that they have that skill. And the lowest is obviously connecting to Wi-Fi. We can see breakdown of how many people have each number of skills. So we can see that, you know, 80% have all four. So that's 20% who don't have all four, which is quite a remarkable figure in some ways. Similar sets of information down here for the essential skills for job search, essential digital skills overall, and then zoom out a little bit to make it a little bit easier to see. The relationship between access and skills. So this is people who do have internet at home. We can see the numbers are much higher for those who don't have internet at home in terms of having all the skills for foundational skills and essential skills, and similar number of devices. Is a huge disparity. People who don't have a device, so 6% of people who have engaged with this survey or this assessment, you know, no device, 12% of people have all the foundational skills. That's 88% of people do not say they have all the foundational skills. They don't have a device. Relationship with age. Sorry, that's not a relationship with age. This is the breakdown of people who don't have all the foundational skills and then people who don't have all the digital skills. So we can see, excuse me, what the characteristics are across here. So I mean, rather than kind of go through each individual measure here, probably easier if I just go back to the PowerPoint slides and come on to findings so far. And a bit smaller, I hope you can read this, and some of this will have come through already in what I've just said. So we can see that 20% of users didn't have all 4 foundational skills, 42% of users didn't have all 8 essential digital skills, and 34% didn't have all 4 essential digital skills for work. And then if we look at the least common skills across all of these, you can see what those are as they come through here. Again, this kind of uploading CVs to job search sites, that's kind of quite a remarkable one. We consistently get about 20% of people coming through Southwark Works service who say they cannot upload a CV to a job search site and cannot attach a CV to an email. So that's 20% of people who are out of work and looking for work and engaging with that service. We can see that the number of users who have no Wi-Fi broadband at home, no device. We've seen the relationship between that and all foundational essential skills. When we get down to kind of the equality level and using those slices to break down the different groups, unsurprisingly, there's a direct correlation with age. If we plotted it, it would be just a declining line in terms of access in terms of both access and skill levels. So we see that sort of 64% of over 55 don't have all 8 essential digital skills against a general picture of 42%. 21% don't have internet at home. Over 55, 10% do not have a device. So that's against 13% and 6% for all users. So direct relationship. There's relatively little variation across ethnic groups, although we found that Asian and Latin American users in Southwark in these organisations were more likely to have all essential digital skills, but I wouldn't draw any conclusions from that across the general population. In terms of genders, relatively little difference, although some slight difference in the kind of relationship between essential digital skills sort of for life and essential digital skills for job search. The strongest relationship of all is between disability and apart from age is disability. People who declare disability have fewer devices, much less likely to have all the essential digital skills and less likely to have internet at home. And obviously disability being related to all sorts of other kind of metrics potentially around lack of access to other services, poverty, exclusion in general. That's a kind of a serious indicator both on its own and as potentially as a proxy. So I'll just run through a couple of quick case studies about then how we've used this tool. Southwark Works, first of all. So again, Southwark Works is a employment support organisation. It supports people kind of furthest from the labour market. It's got a hub on Walworth Road, which is kind of fairly central in Southwark. They were the early adopters. We've seen by far, the majority of people coming through this, coming into most of the data coming in is from Southwark Works users. Established early on that over 20% were unable to use online job search. So what they've done basically is what we hope all organisations will be able to do is kind of look at the data across the piece, pull out those users, identify the cohort of clients at the highest level of need, both in terms of skills and lack of access. And then using the partnership that's been established with other organisations in Southwark, they've worked with a trainer from Morley College to develop a bespoke kind of in-person regular support service focused on meeting those needs identified through the skills needs assessment. So that's providing weekly training alongside the advisor-led employment support. And then through another kind of partnership, tackling the wider digital exclusion issue, which is so those who didn't have a device at home, which is I think majority considering the skills levels, enabled kind of refurbished devices to be provided to those who've completed that program to support them with their ongoing job search. It's pretty straightforward, but just having standard data collected over a period of time has enabled them to kind of work through their cohort of users and pull out a need and meet it directly. And it's currently being evaluated, but the response has been really good. Engagement's been really good, and they're looking to expand that. Another way in which we've been using this is through the local digital champions. So we have a digital champions lead within the council who's been building up the network of community volunteers over the past year. And they've been using this to go out into the borough, both as a kind of a survey where we've done some estate-based work, and also using in kind of community settings. And as I said, this has both been used kind of on tablets and with on paper format. The when someone uses the tool and they don't click one of the kind of learner provider organizations, then that individual can kind of refer themselves onto or be referred onto additional support. And that provides a kind of an opt-in to work with the digital champions. So that referral is received then by the digital inclusion team within the council. They will contact the resident and make the link once they've done a kind of a further review. They will then make the link with that individual and a local digital champion. So that champion then works with the resident, works through all their challenges, develops a learning plan, provides them with ongoing support, meets their targets, and that continues until they're happy, basically. So just as an example of this, out in East Dulwich, a resident referred to the team after engaging with one of the community support organisations. She was linked up with a digital learning partner, so digital champion essentially, at a community centre over in East Dulwich. And this particular issue as is quite often, particularly with more vulnerable residents or elderly residents, she was concerned about online safety, which tracks across to the data showing that most people feel least confident about password security, online safety, identifying unsafe web links, etc. So work with a volunteer to review and to develop a learning plan around this. That's recently ended, and she feels very confident now going online. She knows the volunteer is very professional, and she knows what support's available if necessary. So that's a kind of long-term aim to kind of get this tool kind of out used in the community as much as we can, get as many partners engaged with it. So even if they can't provide support themselves, they can then refer into a council digital champions program, which can then provide a link to a community digital champion who can provide the kind of support on a voluntary basis. But there's lots of different ways this could go. So issues and challenges. I mean, I think I've mentioned some of these as I've gone through, and I'm sure you'll realise it's not been a kind of a straightforward run. I mean, one thing is obviously just agreeing a base level of needs analysis across multiple partners. So basically agreeing the questions that we want to ask that gives everybody a decent set of information, but we don't overload individuals with endless questions to get the minutiae of nuance that everybody might want for their particular circumstances. So that kind of involved quite a lot of kind of a fair number of iterations, to be honest, to get down to a kind of the fairly straightforward set of questions that we have now. The differences in use, so I touched on this. Some Southwark Works in particular assess all clients who come through the door, others only those who are presenting for digital skills training. And sorry, I wasn't totally clear on this earlier, but so that makes a slight difference in the data. In a way, it's fine because it's what works for that organisation. I think from a kind of a central position where we're analysing this data across the whole borough, ideally we would have everybody who walks through the door of a service and might potentially have a digital skills need completing this assessment, because then we're really capturing the breadth of need. There is an element of kind of self-selection within it though. So we live with that because it's about kind of making it useful for the organisations who are using it. Suitability for use on and offline. Yes, as I mentioned, it's designed for online use. If you have digital skills needs, you need someone sitting down with you to walk you through it. Paper versions are available, then it just needs a manual upload. And that's that's admin and resource that not everybody has. We really wanted to work with DWP and they were very keen, but national organisation, it just doesn't quite meet. It can't fit into their processes currently, which is disappointing. But we want to continue working on that, because I think that could be a real game changer if we're able to. And for themselves, at the moment, DWP are not identifying needs that perhaps they could be if they were using a tool like this. Doesn't have to be this tool, but if they were having a straightforward needs assessment for every client that comes through the door, then they could be identifying needs and challenges that could be overcome far more quickly through this route. I mentioned data sharing. That's being kind of worked on at the moment. We started off with something very straightforward, a kind of fairly straightforward template data sharing agreement. That's now moved into more of a kind of licensing agreement. It's the kind of a legal thing, but I'm sure it will continue to develop. The key question, which I've not really kind of gone into in a great deal of detail, except for the two case studies, is kind of the use question for the data analysis. It's a question of data. It's always very nice to have lots of data. We feel comfortable and reassured looking at numbers and charts and things, and looking at patterns and putting things into boxes. But the question still needs to be kind of a very practical one about what for, what next, why are we collecting this, how is it useful? And in many ways, we started off on this journey just saying we think this will be useful, we think this could be useful, let's build it and see how useful it is. And in a way, this is where we are right now. We've only really been capturing this data properly for about 6 months. We've been working on the dashboard for about a similar time, and it's been through a couple of iterations itself. This conversation with yourselves is a kind of an extension of that. Where do people see potential use for this? So we've got the data now, and it's kind of the next step about really thinking about how we use that to target services, to identify gaps, to work on areas where we could be more innovative, to think about where we're missing information, for example, around accessibility, think more deeply about the kind of the link between disability and lack of access and inclusion, for example, but I think there's much further we can go there. The basic stuff around getting data into a format that it's kind of useful. There's a bit of maintenance and manual cleaning that needs to be done. We're not at the kind of click of a button stage yet. It's fairly messy data, kind of downloads from the form and then uploads to the dashboard that kind of needs some cleaning and fixing and tidying up in between. And the next steps really. So the scale question. Where do we go with this? Is it something that we need to do more to make it really useful for Southwark, or and then does it stop in Southwark, or is it we certainly want to engage more partners in Southwark and get more people involved using it, particularly in kind of community settings. And then outside of Southwark, is it a kind of a question of have we done something that is useful for other people, even not in this format? We could completely potentially rip this apart and start again. But just thinking about the kind of the process that we've been through and what we're trying to do with it is useful, potentially in other areas too. Which brings us on to next steps, and I'll kind of wrap up shortly after this, and hopefully there's sort of questions and discussion that we can have. We want to continue working with partners. We've done a fair amount of squirreling away by ourselves, and now it's about kind of sharing it out in the open and getting feedback and seeing what people think. So that involves working in the borough and also with LOTI. We need to improve the targeting of resources. As a result of that, there's the whole question of digital inclusion beyond skills, which is a much bigger issue, and we're doing much more of. But linking some of this information through to questions of access to devices and data is important. As I mentioned, working with community-based organisations to improve the kind of breadth of engagement, and and the future, you know, where do we want to get to? Well, I think, you know, my personal dream for Southwark would be a kind of an integrated programme, a sort of an umbrella resource around skills, devices and data for digital inclusion that all partners can draw on at a kind of disaggregated level. Whether we'll get that, I don't know, but I think this exercise of kind of data collection analysis is important to think about what it is that we need to build. So I'll leave some questions up, and by all means completely ignore these, but it's about what I'm interested in is whether you can see opportunities with this or none at all, how it can be improved or built upon. Would it be useful pan-London or wider, or just, you know, ask me any questions you have, or say thanks very much and we'll carry on. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Nick. That was a really comprehensive and useful overview, I think, of the tool. And yeah, particularly like seeing those case studies as well to see how it's been put to use. I know we've got a couple of questions in the chat, but shall I just go to Maria first, as she's popped her hand up?
Hello there. Hi, thanks so much, Nick. This is super interesting. I've had a couple of thoughts in my head that might be useful to share, and then a specific question for Nick, and then another one for you, Sophie, if that's okay. So I guess my first thought was about the users of this tool. So in my head, there's the council, and the use for you is the data itself. Then there's the service providers, and they can be using the data, whether it's to, you know, to collect the data and strategically plan their delivery of the program, or support individuals. And then there's the channel through the individual filling it in, not clicking in a specific service, and going through your digital champions. So I guess it works a little bit almost like a triaging tool as well. So the person knows where they will be picked up at the other end as of their journey. I guess my question about the data is something that you mentioned earlier, in terms of it's very specific people that are filling this in. So you're having a picture of a very specific demographic, I guess. So it is the people that are accessing Haringey Works. So essentially that's my, unless your strategy is to have everyone using it, regardless whether they're interested in digital and they've identified a need for themselves or not, then the data for the council will, because I'm working for a council and I'm thinking, oh, how can I collect this data? But I'm wondering how representative that data will be of the needs of the residents. And I guess my question about the person that fills it in and doesn't click the Morley College or Southwark College is, your digital inclusion champions, are they a program that you, as part of the digital department, manage, and was the training and stuff that is provided to them, is it by the council, or have you partnered with like Digital Unite or something like that? Is it resourced via the council? And I guess my other question for Sophie was, in terms of, I attended the Havering triaging tool as well, and I guess I'm wondering how these tools that are coming out of these programs can work together, or how does LOTI see them kind of feeding into each other? Because I was making links in my head between that presentation and this these two tools, I guess, and how they can be brought together in a way. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I'll answer quickly, and apologies, I hadn't left quite enough time for questions. I made the rookie mistake of not sitting near a clock. Very simply, I think your first kind of observation is absolutely right, and that's something we're working through, is about kind of making sure that we're not making too many assumptions about the data that we've collected, but also what can we use it for? So leaving aside the fact that it's not perfect, you know, there's still plenty of use in there and still plenty of insight in there. And then taking the next step from that. So, you know, we're never going to get perfect data unless it's on the census. So it's just working with that, kind of being comfortable, I think, with that uncertainty about it. The digital champions, yes, they are a council resource, and we actually took the decision to invest in that directly ourselves. We had done some work, so I mentioned the relationship with broadband providers. So some of the kind of social value provided by broadband providers who had way-leave agreements was around working with organisations like Digital Unite, for example. There were some successes with that. It wasn't necessarily sustainable in that model. So to take it forward, we've kind of brought it into the council and now have a council officer whose responsibility is to manage and develop that programme himself.
Great, thank you. That's really useful to know. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, and just to answer the second question, Maria. So yes, I went to that show and tell as well. Very interested to know to keep up to date with what Havering are doing, and something that we're doing at LOTI with a few other boroughs as well is looking at a triaging solution, which is, I think, how Nick and I started talking, because we were keen to see how this tool was working as well. I suppose maybe the difference is that the triage tool, particularly the one that LOTI's working on, this why we're keeping in touch with Tracy, is more about, I suppose, digital inclusion more generally. So looking at all the different elements like connectivity and devices and things like that. And it's more of a sort of signposting tool, I suppose, for the interventions within a borough. Whereas with what Nick's presented today, at the moment, it's more sort of being used by those partner organisations, I guess, to better sort of coordinate or develop the training, and the people that they're actually, you know, their clients, I suppose, need more specifically. I guess, though, there might be an overlap if more people come across the tool online, for example. So they're the ones that, as you said, like tick the option that isn't, I'm part of this, you know, training external provider or anything like that. It might then end up that it needs to be more of a signposting tool at the end. So I think that's where it could join up. So I think in terms of what we're working on and testing with a triage, it's a sort of simple question process that can be asked in any of the sort of customer resident contact centres, basically, across the councils. Once we've tested that and seen how that works, it might be that then we have that conversation with Nick to see how we can bring it together. And also by that point, I think, Nick, with the tool that you're using, perhaps more people will have heard about it and be coming across it independently as well. So it'd probably be a good time at that point anyway to sort of see how we can join up, I think. So yeah, that's a really good question, Maria, and definitely something for us to be thinking about.
Thank you very, very much, both. Super, super interesting stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. There's a couple of questions in the chat. I know that so Rafi's had to drop off, but she's put two in. I might just pick one, because I think the first one, I think you answered after she dropped off, and she's going to be looking at the recording anyway. But how have you dealt with accessibility of the form itself for people with access requirements?
Not directly, but only in the sense that it is as any form hosted on the council website. There are various accessibility tools embedded within the website which support access. So there's, you know, screen readers and large fonts and things like that. But I think it's an important question. I think that one of the organisations that we started working with a lot more closely is an organisation that supports use of assistive technologies, particularly for people with disabilities, and that's a whole new field for, I think, for many of us kind of working in this space around kind of the what essential means, and making sure that you know, that needs that you know, that digital skills needs are really targeted at people with specific skills needs that are related to disability and access. So yeah, I mean, in terms of the form itself, we kind of link that across to anything that comes through the council website, and making sure that it meets the standards that are required of it there.
Brilliant, thank you. And just to double check, actually, just to make sure that we have definitely answered Rafi's first question, which is how easy is it for the individual to, when they've got the results, to know what that means in terms of the right support for them? I guess, is it right in saying that so if they're working with those providers, then they'll be arranging the support for them? If they come in through saying that they're not part of the providers, they'll be contacted anyway if they've asked to be?
Yes, they can then basically click a little box that says I'd like to be contacted to be offered support, and then that's where our digital champion service will pick that up and make the referral through.
Brilliant, thank you. And Kate, just to answer your question about the recording, yes, definitely we'll be sharing it. I'll send it as an email to everyone who registered via Eventbrite, and also I'll put it on our LOTI Basecamp as well. Cool, thanks, Kate. I think we've got time for one more question, if anyone has one. I don't think I've missed any other ones. Michael.
Hello. My apologies if you have actually covered this, but I was just wondering, how is this tool being promoted by yourselves?
It's being promoted through our digital champions, through the partnership, so the network partners that we have. So the 20 organisations that we work with, and we're hoping to continue to expand. They're all able to use the tool, whether or not they're kind of signed up as an official partner. They can still kind of refer their clients to it, and so they can complete the form. We send things out through kind of council communication. So, like, you know, there's a quarterly magazine, there's a newsletter that goes out, there's we have posters up in libraries and community centres. So, you know, it's the kind of the standard approach. What we don't do is promote it as kind of fill out this form and see what help you need. But it's kind of, it's promoted as a kind of a general sort of set of wider support around digital skills. So every time there's a message that goes out around digital skills, we send people to the landing page and to the option to kind of test your digital skills there as well. So it's kind of, it's a sort of a first stop in any message that goes out around essential digital skills. I hope that answers the question. I hadn't really thought about that question very deeply.
Sorry about that. Thank you anyways, much appreciated.
No worries.
Cool, thanks, Michael. Okay, so it's 12 o'clock now, so I think we'll wrap up. But thank you everybody for attending, and everyone that managed to ask questions. Nick, I wondered, would you be happy when I share the recording afterwards, either dropping your email in case people have further questions or feedback or thoughts? Yeah, you have. I was going to say, otherwise I can put mine in and I can triage that, I suppose, in a way. But yeah, and thank you, Nick. That was really, really great and insightful and useful. So thank you for taking the time today when I know you're a bit ill as well. So really appreciate it.
No worries.
Brilliant. So thanks, everyone, and hopefully speak to you all soon.
Thank you. Thanks very much.